17. This is
Mark.
Your name, who you are, what you really do.
Who I am and what I really do. Let's see. I'm Jerry Garcia, and I play the guitar for the Grateful Dead, amongst other things.
And your own musical influences when you were growing up, who did you listen to as a kid?
Do you really want you really want to hear that? Oh, well.
Well, I can explain some more. I mean, country music, essentially, the whole,
I had lots. I had eclectic influences. Let's put it that way. I heard virtually every kind of music. My father was a musician. My mother was a coloratura. Soprano, and I heard every kind of music. My grandmother loved country music, the Grand Ole Opry, and Harry Owens and his Royal Hawaiians. I heard all kinds of things. My ears were full of music, So plus the popular music of the time, the 40s and 50s, when I was growing up. But I was at the inception of rock and roll. I listened to rhythm and blues. I had an older brother who was a rhythm and blues nut, and so I got rhythm and blues from him. And then rock and roll, as it developed in the 50s, was like my music. That was my native music, so to speak. And that was the thing that made me want to play, was rock and roll. The first thing I heard when I heard the electric guitar and Chuck Berry and all the great, licks, the rock and roll licks, and just the sound of the electric guitar, I thought, God, I really want to do that. And I got my first electric guitar when I was 15, and that was it.
And what did you play at first?
Well, I first played electric guitar. I took piano lessons as a kid, but it didn't take. So guitar playing was really the first thing I took, where I really wanted to do it. Well, I didn't know that I wanted to do it. I just couldn't stop doing it. But the first thing I got really serious about, in the sense of being rigorous, was the five-string banjo. And I heard bluegrass music, and that got to be something very important to me. And so I swung off into that for 4 or 5 years, and really started to work hard at the five-string banjo. And that's where I slowed records down, and I wanted it to sound exactly right, not just approximately right. And I did that for a while. And then the rock and roll wave came up, with the Beatles and stuff like that. And hey, that looks like it'd be fun to do. And besides, I know this music, and so having a preference for the kind of more like the Chicago sound, the blues sound, the Marshall Chess sound, that sort of thing. Our band, when we started a band, it was kind of more like the Rolling Stones, say, insofar as it was that kind of music. We started playing not quite a blues band, sort of a blues band, and with kind of folk and country and western overtones. So that's that's my background pretty much. But it really, there's nothing I haven't heard.
So apologizing for the question in advance. The way that the sort of Dead got together in the sort of early stages, and perhaps wrapping the acid test somehow.
You really want to hear all this stuff? It's so okay. Well, the Grateful Dead is really a collection of friends, people that were around at the time, and who played some. Not everybody was really. When the Grateful Dead first started, we were called the Warlocks. We had one strong suit. We had Pigpen in the band, and he was this guy from Palo Alto whose father had been a rhythm and blues disc jockey. So for him, the blues was very natural, and he played harmonica, and he sang really well, and he really had no real wish to be a performer. We sort of forced him into it because we knew he could do it. And so he was kind of the front man for the band. He was our powerhouse guy, and the rest of us could play better than him, but he could sing better than anybody else. So he got to be the front man for the band, and it worked well. We ended up kind of playing the divorcees clubs up and down the Bay Area, down the peninsula and East Bay and San Francisco. We ended up playing Broadway in San Francisco, which was about as far as you could go as a band in those days. We had we were working for the local agent, the guy that booked all the bands in the Bay Area and worked with the union. This guy did. And his name was Al King, and he used to book the strippers and dog acts and magicians and anything you can think of. He was like the guy in the Bay Area, and so we were doing that. That was our circuit. We played typically we played 6 nights a week, five sets a night. That was what we did. We just did it and did it and did it, and we got good doing it. I mean, it was a great way to get good, and we were young enough to love it, And it was also, we made enough so we could quit our day jobs, That was what we did. That happened immediately. That was the first thing that happened with us. So we were already, like burning out on the professional level that was available to us about the time the acid test came to our attention. But we were already from Palo Alto. We all knew Kesey, and we all knew friends of ours that were involved with him. We'd all taken acid ourselves. And so it seemed natural to go. We got invited, actually, to one of these parties. This is before there were acid tests even. There was just parties. And we got invited to one of these parties. We went down there. We plugged all our stuff in and played for about a minute. And then we all freaked out. But we made a good impression on everybody in that minute, So we were invited to the next one. And so we just started playing at these things. They were great fun, and they were very liberating for us because, after all, I mean, we'd come to our like Sunday night shows, and after having spent the day stoned on acid up in the woods somewhere, and we come down to the bars and play, Sunday night. It was like, we were playing like sort of maliciously, because it was so lame, at that time. We were pretty burned out on it, and so we were ready for something completely freeform. It kind of went along with where we were going, which was we were experimenting with psychedelics as much as we were playing music. So that those things had a happy new home in the acid test, which was exactly freeform enough, and where we had no significance. We weren't famous. Nobody came to the acid test to see us particularly. We got to play or not play, depending on how we felt. We could play anything we could think of, which meant that we didn't have any constraints on our performance. We didn't have to be good even, or recognizable even. So we had an opportunity to visit highly experimental places under the influence of highly experimental chemicals before a highly experimental audience. It was ideal, and that was something that we got to do long enough to get used to it, and that's the kind of territory that I think very few people have been lucky enough to have that kind of. It was like a gift. Very few people have been lucky enough to get that. And not only that, we had the peripheral perks of getting to hang out with Kesey and Ken Babbs and Neil Cassidy and a lot of interesting people, an awful lot of interesting people, and meeting more each time. The acid test would perform, Wavy Gravy and so on. All these people are people that we met through the aegis of the acid test, so to speak, and the acid test started expanding at an incredible rate. I mean, it started from about enough people to fill a room this size to enough to fill the Longshoremen's Hall in San Francisco, and it had virtually no advertising or anything, and you had to sort of be a detective to even find out where they were going to be, but even so, they got to be immensely popular. And more people came to them. More and more people got high. It was an incredible situation. I mean, it seemed like after about 3 or 4 months, it seemed like the acid test was going to take over the world in about a year. It was totally fun, and it was a great. It was a wonderful multimedia event. Is what I can say. It really worked. It was absolutely entertaining. It was 100% fun. That's all I can say, really. And it was utterly cosmic to boot.
One thing that was interesting to me about the acid test is that it's a breakdown between the audience and the performer, something you try and do.
Yeah, there really was no audience, to speak of. I mean, there was no entertainer entertained thing. Everybody was entertaining. Everything there was entertaining. Every event, everything that happened was entertaining. And it didn't need to you didn't need expertise. You know what I mean? So you didn't need the um, the musician chauvinism. You know, you didn't. You know, the artist chauvinism. Like, I can do something you can't do. You know, now all that stuff went up in smoke, which I think was very good. You know, it was good for everybody. Everybody learned a lot from that process. I think everybody who ever went to an acid test came out a different person. You know, and loved it. You know, I mean, that's the sort of thing it was.
Were you involved in the, or were you two have been involved in the acid test graduation that Bill Graham pulled the plug of? He's talking about the mic. Do you know the story of that?
Yeah, I remember there was kind of a deal. Well, see, at that time we had regular shows. So the acid test, there was a conflict there. We had a regular show. The acid test graduation was happening that night. Now, it's possible that somebody was trying to use it as a kind of a power play, you know. Well, you know, I don't know. But by then, we knew that if somebody was going to pay us to play, we had a responsibility. You know, the acid test was not that kind of scene. It wasn't about getting paid. You know what I mean? It wasn't really about that. Everybody paid to get into it. Everybody. You know, we paid each $1 to get into it. You know, so it wasn't that kind of thing. And then all the money went into a plastic sack. If somebody was hungry, they took a couple of dollars out and went and got some hamburgers. You know what I mean? It was totally, you know.
Sorry, roll out.
We rolled out.
Totally ...
Totally.
Rolled out.
It was like totally.
Yeah, totally. Totally, I don't know, like communistic.
Great.
Do it.
Mark?
What if you comment on essentially on Kesey, Cassidy, Wavy, I mean, and the kinds of roles they had in mainly Cassidy, actually.
Well, Cassidy is one of the kind of people that you know, he's so he was such an overwhelming trip. Cassidy, I don't know. It's hard to even know what to say about Cassidy. He was so singular. I mean, it's just, well, for one thing, he was like the best, the ultimate sight gag person. You know what I mean? Physical comedy person. You know. Plus, he was also the world's best stand-up comic too. He had an incredible mind. That he would do this thing. He did it to everybody. Everybody has reported on this. He did it to everybody. You might not see him for months, you know, and he would pick up exactly where he left off the last time he saw you. You know, like in the middle of a sentence, he would pick up and you first of all you go, what the hell? And then you realize, oh yeah, this is that story he was telling me last time. You know, and it was like so mind-boggling. You couldn't believe that he was doing it. He used to do this thing that was this was something that killed me, and I saw him do it a lot of times. He'd take a dollar bill, you know, from anybody, you know, and take a dollar bill, and he'd put his hand on it like this, and he'd say the numbers, you know, the serial number, and you know I saw him get it right like 2 or 3 times. The serial numbers, you know what I mean? He just had this. He had this thing, you know, and his driving. Yeah, if you go for a drive with him, it was like the ultimate fear experience. You know that you knew you were going to die. And there was no question about it, and it was something so unbelievable. He loved big Detroit irons, you know, big cars, and he like driving in San Francisco. He would go down those hills, you know, like 50 miles and 60 miles an hour. And do corners, you know, blind corners going down those hills. You know, if you can imagine, like going down Franklin, you know, like top speed. You know what I mean? You know, disregarding anything, stop signs, signals, all the time talking to you, and maybe fumbling around with a little teeny roach, you know, trying to put it in a matchbook, you know, and also tuning the radio maybe, and also talking to whoever else is in the car, and it never seeming to ever put his eyes on the road ever, you know, and this is like you'd be just dying, you know, you'd be dying, and it would effectively take you past that whole fear of death thing, you know. It's like a difficult experience because there's nothing else like it, apart from like almost like surviving an airplane crash possibly or something. I don't know what, but and I mean it was just so incredible, you know. It just his output, you know what I mean. and he felt he was the first person I met who he himself was the art. You know what I mean? He was an artist, and he was the art also, and he was doing it consciously as well. You know, so he did things. He worked with the world. I remember one time after a, a party, well, after the Watts acid test, which was particularly strange, and we drove the bus over to the Watts Towers for a minute or two, and we got out and looked at them, you know, and we were, you know, it's dawn. We went over to Wavy Gravy's house, which was down in like, off of Western, you know, way the hell off somewhere funny in Los Angeles. And they had a little house, and we had the bus there, and a bunch of us are sitting on the lawn, and we're all kind of crunched from being up all night, stoned on acid. You know, it's like the dawn. It's Sunday morning now, the dawn, and the bus is parked across the street. From our point of view, we're on the lawn, and it's Sunday morning early, and here's Neil, you know, and he's ripped his shirt off. He has no shirt on now, and now he's no shirt, no shoes, and these funky old chinos he always have. They're always like just about to fall off, you know. And he's, first of all, George Walker's driving the bus, so George is driving the bus, and Neil is like the guy directing him into the parking place, you know, a little to the left, a little to the right. And he's doing all with signals, and he directs him right into a stop sign, an arterial stop sign, and knocks it, it shears it off, boom, and the stop sign falls down. So then Neil gets up, then the bus is parked, and Neil gets up and he's got the stop sign, you know, and he's like kind of trying to make it stand up, you know. And so he's there with this stop sign, and down the street come like two really straight little old ladies, you know, and they're on their way to church Sunday morning, you know. And here's Neil, he's like the cosmic village drunk, you know what I mean? He's like, and he's got the stop sign, you know. They're trying not to see him, you know, and he's doing this whole series of kind of like, "Good morning, ma'am," you know, kind of pantomime, you know, this extravagant thing all the time. He would kind of like stand up the stop sign and then walk away from it, and it'd start to fall, and he'd grab it just as I'm about to hit, you know, and all this stuff happening. It was like amazingly great. It was just beautiful, perfect timing, you know, and it's just extraordinarily beautiful, you know, and the way his body moved, the way he looked and everything like that was just absolutely, his face is so expressive. He would go through millions of expressions, just millions of them, and just his whole body language and everything was so communicative. It was just amazing. It was, I was dying. I thought I was going to die. It was so hilarious. It was absolutely perfect. You know, it was like a little silent movie, a silent ballet, you know, in the morning. It lasted about maybe a minute and a half, you know, 2 minutes, but it was perfect. You know, it was like a perfect moment. It was just great. And I mean, Neil was that guy. I mean, he just could do that. You know, that's who he was. You know, he was that guy in the real world. You know, he was this something. He scared a lot of people. A lot of people thought he was crazy. You know, a lot of people were afraid of him, and most people I know didn't understand him at all. You know, but he was like a musician in a way. I mean, he liked musicians. He always liked to hang out with musicians. That's why he sort of picked up on us and me, and we hung out together a lot. And he liked the company of musicians.
When you were living in Haight, was he around during that?
Yeah, he was off and on. He stayed up in our attic when we were in 710. He had a little camp up there, you know, with a mattress, and his old Cheetos, his old jeans, and stuff like that were up there. And he would come in and hang out for a week or so every month or so, you know, every couple of months maybe, you know, he'd come in and yeah.
About the Haight, when you were during the period of time when you would do free concerts in the Panhandle, I mean,
Yeah.
could you give us a little context on that? Why you would, what the community was like, and how the bed contributed?
Well, there wasn't really. We were, you know, there were a lot of people there that were like us. They were people whose whole lives they'd been a little bit different, you know, from everybody else. They were the people that were looking for something different. They would have become beatniks. You know what I mean? They were all people who were like influenced by the beatniks in a sense, and they were artists, and they were poets and writers and all kinds of people. But they were all people whose life experience had been that they were a little out of whack with everything else, you know, during high school or, you know, their whole lives, and they sort of came together, and it was just an ideal place for it because the rent was real cheap. The houses were wonderful. They're beautiful old Victorians, you know. And you get 4 or 5 people, and you can rent a huge, wonderful Victorian house, fix it up any way you want, and it was great. It was a great way to live. And there was no community in the sense of we are a community. But then after the first thing called the human being, that thing, it was like, yeah, there is all these people that we're all, it's like, yeah, there is a community. There is this whole big community. It's all these people who potentially know each other. We're all those people who are the weird ones, And it was all of a sudden you discovered all these people who were like you, and that was the neat part about it. First, that was the first thing. Now, of course, that disappeared immediately. I mean, as soon as it started getting to be publicized, then it all, of course, it evaporated immediately, and it no longer was important. It no longer had any power. Really. It did for the first couple of minutes, and then it went whoosh, and it was gone. And, it wasn't relevant anymore. Not to the people who started there, And as soon as that happened, everybody started to just disappear. They disappeared over to Marin County and other places, and because nobody wants to be in the center of the spotlight. Not in your life, maybe in your work, but not in your life. And those of us who were performers, like the Grateful Dead and stuff, we just performed, and we at that time we started going national. We started touring the whole United States, so it was no longer community to us in the real sense. In the real sense, America became our community, and that was it. It was really a moment. There was like a breath there for a moment. That was like an open door. It's like, ooh, look, then bam, it slammed shut again immediately, and everybody finally moved out of the original people there. Everybody left. When the tanks came down the street, the National Guard came. I mean, the Haight-Ashbury, like, what was more harmless? It was totally harmless, and the reaction ultimately was the National Guard, fixed bayonets, tanks on Haight Street. It was like, come on, it was like something of an overreaction, and it was so completely skewed. It didn't make any sense anymore. That was it. Everybody who had anything going for them really left after that. That was it. That was the end of it.
But there was something that everyone took with them. I mean, something did happen.
Well, there was a moment there. There was a moment there where there was a vision. There was a very clear, wonderful vision but it had to do with everybody acting in good faith. It had to do with everybody behaving right. You know what I mean? It had to. There was a lot to it. It wasn't a simple thing, It was a deep. There was a lot to it.
That if we could.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Speed. Yeah, speed.
Right. So more on the point of essentially what happened at that one moment when it was together.
Well, what happened was that everybody got a glimpse of something. I can't say what it is. I don't know what it is. I know. To me, it was might have been something like limitless possibilities. You know what I mean? Something like that, maybe. But I mean, the thing was that in the meantime, in my life, what had happened to me just a little before that was that I had some incredible psychedelic experiences that were so cosmic, they were so huge in scope. You know what I mean? That I knew that I knew that all of a sudden, I had to revise everything that I thought I knew about anything. I had to, I said, this stuff is coming from somewhere. If it's not out there, it's coming from me. It's coming from my mind, my brain. That means my brain has an infinite amount of capacity in there that I had no sense of. I didn't know anything about it, but there it was, and I've seen it. I not only saw it, but I walked around in it. I had a million incarnations in it. I lived and died in it. You know what I mean? I had experiences beyond anything I've ever experienced, more real than anything I ever experienced in this world, And I mean, I was packing that knowledge around with me, you know what I mean? So the thing of this door opening was it was one of those things that we were all inducing it as well as perceiving it, you know what I mean? It's hard to say, I think it was probably everybody saw what they wanted to see or what they needed to see or whatever it was, They'd all been brought there somehow for that moment, for that moment. And you can't even say what it was or when it was or what it boiled down to or anything like that. It wasn't even like that. It was just something, And, but for me, it's been enough energy to keep me going this long, and I don't see any end, at least for me, in terms of my work, of information in terms of, do I need to go looking for material? No, I don't. I don't need to go looking for material. I have like an infinite amount of material has been deposited, and all I have to do is like tune into it, which is real easy to do because it's always there, So it's I mean, I don't know how to say it except that it's real to me. You know what I mean? That those experiences were real to me, and nobody can take that away from me. The realness of it. You know what I mean? So it doesn't matter to me whether it has any historical value or whether it's measurable in some objective way. I don't care. It doesn't matter. For me, the subjective reality is what counts. I mean, what I experienced is what happened to me, and that was there's a lot. I know a lot of people who shared something like it, their own version of it, and who are still moving with that energy. That energy is propelling us, and that energy has also gained enough momentum over the years to do everything. I mean, it is partly responsible for all the things that have happened historically since then, in some way. It's part of it. It's part of the gain in consciousness that the last half of this century has represented. And that includes all the things that go with it. All the hardware, the technology, the brain craft, that has subsequently sprung up, and it's still rolling. It's still happening. And people are still sort of that experience is now available.
Well, what was incredible for me is that I felt everything that you just said, phrased differently in my own way.
Yeah.
In Vermont.
Yeah, well,
Through the music.
I don't think it's place. It's not a place. It's not place specific. You know what I mean? It's not site specific.
In terms of rock and roll music, it was the music that flowed around on the albums that made people like me in different locations feel the same thing. We were doing psychedelics at the same time.
Well, once you were touched by that, it was like dog shit on your shoe. You couldn't get it off, or I mean, it's part of everything you did, you know what I mean? You sort of touched by this wand, ding. Okay, now some percentage of everything you do is going to have that thing in it, and it'll communicate it to anybody who's can dig it,
So when you toured in the 60s then, and going to towns, you probably have never seen anything remotely like you, or your...
That's for sure.
I mean, how were people responding? Were they into the group, or were they...
Well, the audiences caught on. They always caught on. The people in the world, were like, not here, you don't. When you walk into a Holiday Inn or, someplace to say, oh, no, you don't, not here, And we got that kind of reaction the first couple of years we were out, it was like, because people were used to seeing freaks then, and that was still a big novelty, So that was fun for us because it was the last chance you had to shock people, just by the way you looked, just by the way you were, You didn't even have to think about it or work at it at all. You could just walk down the street and people go, oh my God, That was fun. We got in on the last of that probably. The music. Well, the Grateful Dead has always been like a very chancy musical experience. And back then, what we were doing had the nature of it was that some nights it would be just awful, and some nights it would be wonderful. And if people caught us on an awful night, they went away going, what was that? And if they caught us on a wonderful night, they enjoyed it and they came back again. It's like totally a roll of the dice. Something we never had any control of. We still don't have any control over it, but now our bad nights are accomplished. Now we can at least sound decent. If we were not experiencing authentic inspiration. If we're experiencing authentic inspiration, then something magical sort of takes over. But if we're not, now we can at least sound professional. It's in tune. Everything is like it's supposed to be. It's an okay performance.
The songs that you were doing at that time, you were doing some covers like Trying to Be Good, but
Yeah.
and some of your own music. I mean, how did you decide what to play?
we always had a problem with deciding what to play. We've never been able to decide what to play at all. You know, so back then we were much more free form because we just were not able to decide what to play. So somebody would just start something, and the way we've handled it since then is that we still can't decide what to play, but but now at least we have a lot of stuff to choose from.
Your songwriting with Hunter, I mean, is that about, I mean,
You
presumably
mean
that's
my ha-ha songwriting? It's one of those things. It's a default situation, you know what I mean? It's like somebody in the band's got to, you know, it's like one of those things where, well, who's going to play bass? The guy that plays guitar worst. That's the way it is in most bands, you know. There's like certain things. So the writing songs got it was a default thing, you know. But all of us do some writing, so that I never felt that bad about it. But for me, it's one of those things like a craft, you know. It's like throwing a pot, you know. It's a craft. There's a certain craft to it. It's not for me. I don't know whether my songwriting rises to the level of art. There's one or two songs I think I've written, and Hunter and I have written, that I think are truly wonderful, and but you know, whether anybody else thinks that, I don't know, and I certainly don't feel like I'm a wonderful songwriter. My output is very small, you know. I mean, I'm not prolific by any means. Hunter's output compared to mine is like, it's about, I'd say about 50 to 1. You know, he's like so prolific. But Hunter and I have a wonderful working relationship, so it's always a happy experience writing with him, and that's usually, I don't write unless I write with him, you know. And David is another collaborator. David Grisman is another person I collaborate with comfortably. For me, that's pretty much what I do. I am pretty much a collaborator. I'm pretty much a person who works with other people, not a person who works alone.
Well, the Grateful Dead is one of the most collaborational musical groups there is. I mean, I don't know if you...
Collaborationistic. What is that? What? Never mind. What would that word be?
you work so well as a team. You understand each other. Maybe was it partly through the kind of freeform work you did in the '60s that you developed more? You weren't doing songs so much. You're actually making music.
Well, you know what it really has to do with it. The people in the Grateful Dead are pathologically anti-authoritarian. So it's just, you know, I mean, nobody can tell anybody what to do ever under any circumstances. So that produces a certain amount of. Also, if you ask somebody to play something, they'll never play it. So it produces a kind of music by confluence, you know, or by friction, or by opposites, by you know, it's conflicted. And that makes it interesting. It has a great deal of tension, you know, because everybody plays so differently from each other. I mean, it's like nothing on this earth will make me play like Bob. You know, nothing on this earth will ever make me play like Bob. And I'll be damned if I'm going to play like Phil. You know what I mean? It's like, you know what I mean? It's one of those kind of things. Each one of us experiences some version of that, you know. And it's not even something we consciously do. We just do it. It's like, it's as pure as mother's milk. You know what I mean? It's pure innocence. It's like, there's no premeditation. It's just something that's there. You know, we never decided it. We don't inspect it. We don't deal with it. It's just there, you know. And I've never once in all the years we played together have I ever been able to predict what Bob will play or what Phil will play in a given situation, or the drummers for that matter, you know. I mean, I just have no idea, you know. I don't have a clue, and it's to me that makes it really interesting, you know what I mean? It's just, there's something, the band always has this quality that is totally unpredictable, and there's just no way that you can say what it's going to sound like. I mean, it changes completely, its character completely, you know, from night to night, and you know, it just, I mean, there's just no way to stop it, you know. So it's one of those things. It's not like, how did we arrive at it? It's just like, how can we escape it, you know? You know.
There aren't many bands that work that way.
I don't know. I don't think so. You know, and our lighting designer works that way too. See, so I mean, the whole show has to work.
What are they gonna do? She said, I don't.
No, yeah. What happened to the old Dixon? I like that.
Yeah, spade. Yeah, spade.
Mark.
Fireplace.
We may use a clip of I Know You're Rider from the old Avalon. That, do you have any, what was the history of that song?
The song?
I mean, how did you bring it in?
Jesus. Well, it's an old folk song. I mean, it used to be like a standby, really, in the coffee houses and stuff like that. I never performed it as a bluegrass person or as a. I never was a folkie very much, you know. I just wasn't that good, you know. I mostly played in bands with other people. But I always liked that song, no matter who did it, you know. And there was like all kinds of these folk versions of it and stuff like that. There were really, I mean, there were really modern versions of it, really. But I always liked the song. So I just, you know, of the ones that I could remember, the arrangements, the versions of it melodically, and as far as this chord structure and so forth, that was the one that I sort of culled from my own memory. I don't remember where I learned it. I don't remember who taught it to me, or why I chose it, except it's just a nice song. And I thought it would be ideal to do with an electric band. I viewed an electric band as really, well, it's strings, you know, it's still a string band fundamentally, even though it's electric. So that, and the addition of the drums and that made it sort of more like bluegrass, which is a more intensely rhythmic kind of music. So for me, the elements were there. It was like I viewed the band, the Grateful Dead or the Warlocks or whatever, from the very beginning as like, well, this is a blues band in one sense. In other words, the instrumentation and everything is traditionally what a blues band has had. And in that sense, this is a traditional band. But it's also a kind of mutated, like a bluegrass band on a certain level. I mean, you could approach it. Bluegrass is a nice metaphor for how music can work as a group. In other words, bluegrass is a conversational music. And I thought it'd be nice to have an electric band that was that way. It was conversational, where the instruments talk to each other, you know. And it's a way to organize music. So for me, I Know You're Rider and the arrangement, particularly the Grateful Dead arrangement that the Grateful Dead uses, has a lot of conversation in it. And the instruments kind of talk to each other. And that was the sense that I thought, that was a model for how a band could work. You know what I mean? And it's extracted from all kinds of things, but that's fundamentally an early model of how a band could work. So, which is my throw out. You know, it's what I threw out to say, okay, how could a five-piece, which we originally were, a five-piece electric band work? How could it relate? How could the instruments relate to each other? What would their roles be? You know, and so forth. So that was, you know, that was it, with bits and pieces of regular stuff. So, like in blues, one kind of style of blues, the two guitars, like Jimmy Reed, say, two guitar and a harmonica style of blues, the way the instruments work there is there's a conversation between the guitars. One guitar plays low runs, and the other guitar plays little high licks, less frequently. But they stay out of each other's register. They stay out of each other's range, and it's a very pretty sound. And the bass plays, you know, just simple stuff in the bottom, and and the harmonica plays like over the top. And there's a sense to it, you know, and it makes it very transparent because the instruments are open. Their discussion is like open, you know, there's a lot of air in there. It's a pretty way to work. So we sort of patterned the way we work, the way we approach things, kind of extrapolated from that idea. I mean, you have to decide, somewhere along the line, when you're playing, you have to decide, are we all going to play the same, or are we all going to play differently? I mean, the Grateful Dead always had the disease where we played differently, so that's what we had to work with. But luckily, that approach is not totally unknown. I mean, it's a way, a lot of musics work that way. Either they work that way because the instrumentation is different, like in a string quartet, or they work that way because the music demands it. You know, like in, say, a mandolin orchestra, you know, where everybody's playing the same instrument, but they're all playing different parts.
Your own guitar style has evolved over the. I mean, you have so much confidence in. I mean, you don't feel like you have to, you know, go berserk in order to make people hear what you're getting across.
Well, I'm hoping to not have to go berserk at all. I mean, I will if the situation really calls for it. But really, my model for playing is based on a psychedelic experience. Also, my model for, like, when I go out on stage, what am I trying to accomplish? Okay, here's the story. There's one time we played. We were playing at the old Fillmore, and it was after Bill Graham wasn't running it anymore. So it was some independent, like a hippies, some hippies, local hippies, rented it for some cause or another or whatever. Anyway, we were playing there. It was but Bill wasn't running it, so it was a little bit strange. And there, like, some weird bands were playing on the same bill with us, like maybe, like at that time, say like the Flaming Groovies or somebody like, you know what I mean? Some of the bands that were happening back at that time. This, like, the late '60s. Or the middle late '60s. So this guy who was like sort of a famous freak that ran around the scene in those days, comes in and he's got this big birthday cake. He's got this huge big birthday cake. You know, I'm looking at it thinking, that thing has got to be dosed. I just know this sucker. I know it's dosed. You know, I'm looking at it and looking at it and thinking, yeah, that's right. I'm sure it's done. And then I said, but it looked good. You know, it was beautiful. This beautiful big, you know. So I thought, well, I'll just take a little of the frosting here. You know, just you know, I'll just take a little snack. So I took this, and then somebody comes in and says, yeah, we put about 800 hits of acid in that frosting, you know, and I go, oh God, you know, oh, Jesus Christ, I'm going to be totally fucking wiped out with this, you know. And by this time, I didn't really enjoy playing, you know, under the influence of psychedelics, because I didn't have the freedom to quit if I wanted to. And it wasn't really that much fun to play when you don't have the option, you know, when you don't have options. So I mean, it wasn't something I was looking forward to. And so I'm sitting there and I'm waiting to play, and we're going later. It gets getting later and later and later, and I'm coming on. Now I'm going on like and the place is swimming, and I start to overhear people, you know, and I'm going off in this paranoid space. I'm thinking, God, this place is full of mafia guys, and they're all trying to kill me, you know. I got that notion in my head, you know. This guy comes in. He looks exactly like a mafia guy. You know, he says, "Here, you want something to drink?" And I look at him, poison. You know, no thanks. You know, it's like everybody is armed to the teeth. They're all trying to kill me. Okay, so I'm waiting there to go on. Oh shit, this is it. This is my last night on Earth. You know, I'm convinced of this now. Yeah, still in this psychedelic roar. You know. And so we're going out on stage, you know, to go play, and I'm going out there and I'm thinking, oh God, you know, Jesus, what have I done to deserve this? You know, I'm going to go out there and play, and they're going to fucking kill me, you know. You know. So the only thing I could think of to do was I said, okay, I'm just going to play for my life. I'm going to play for my life. That's what I'm going to do, you know. And so I played for my life, and they let me live. Ever since then, you know, I mean, you know, ever since then I thought that works, you know, for me, is to play for my life, you know. So, you know, you know, when I forget what I'm doing or why I'm doing it, I play for my life.
What comment you have on some of the newer music, you know, funk and rap, that kind of thing?
Well, rap is not music, for one thing. I mean, it isn't music, you know, it's talking. That's what it says, rap. Rap means talking. It's not music. It's talking in meter. It's got rhyme, and it has meter. It has rhythm. It's not music. You know, it's okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I have no problem with it. It just isn't music, you know. And people who get to be great at rap are not great musicians. They're just great at rap, you know. It's not. There's no road from rapping into music. You know what I mean? You know, and music is something that you can get better and better and better at. I don't know if you can do that with rap. You know, I don't know whether it has that kind of space in it, or that kind of leads off into infinite numbers of possibilities. Music does. Rap, I don't know whether it does. Rap also has the problem of this language specific. So, you know, if you don't understand English, you know, rap is, I mean, you know, it doesn't communicate except that it sounds neat. As far as the new music goes, there isn't a whole lot in the way of new music. There's some stuff which is very derivative. You know what I mean? It's like people who are copying people who copied Robert Johnson. You know what I mean? It's far removed, and it's derivative. It's removed enough from the original source that the people who are playing it don't actually know where it came from, and it's like everything else. It's a way station. Anybody who's young and playing is gonna they're gonna get better or they're gonna quit playing. You know, they're probably not going to get worse. You know, so that means that somebody is on the ride. You know, somebody's decided to get on the music ride, and I look forward to seeing them improve. You know, with age, if they have anything going for them at all. Otherwise, you know, I don't know. But the level of expertise that's available now to any young musician is, wow, it's incredible. They can all play. I mean, technically speaking, most instruments have enjoyed an incredible increase in technical skill, and that skill, that virtuosity is available to everybody. In the old days, forget it. You know, you just, you know, I mean, if you're going to get good, you pretty much had to teach yourself, pass beyond a certain point. Now these instruments have, you know, there are whole new levels of playing ability, which have made it more. Well, now it's got the thing that everything else has, which is dividing the technique from from the substance. You know what I mean? It's like it suffers in a way from technique. Music does, because technique, you can get caught up in it, and lose the substance. For me, music is a emotional. It's emotional in nature. It communicates emotionally. That's one of the things it does really well. And I think that if that isn't the sense of what you're doing, then I don't know what it is.
Okay.
Roll out.
Thank you.
Oh,
Can I shut up?
Yeah.
Do I have to keep talking?
All right, everybody.